Good morning, Napa Valley Unitarian Universalists. Welcome to our online worship service. I'm Reverend Dr. Leisa Huyck, and I'm the parish minister here. And with us this morning, for the very first time as celebrant, is Janella Otell. Welcome, Janella. You are welcome in this community if your spirit is heavy with smoke and ashes. You're welcome if it's full of clear blue sky, and you're welcome if it's somewhere in between. You are welcome if your skin is ebony black. You're welcome if your skin is milky white, and you are welcome if it's somewhere in between. You're welcome if you're a man, you're welcome if you're a woman, and you're welcome if you're both, neither, or somewhere in between. You're welcome if you love those of the same gender as you. You're welcome if you love those of a different gender. And you're welcome if you and the people you love are somewhere in between. Whoever you are and whatever your life path, you are welcome here. These are hard times, the times we live in. And so it is all the more necessary that this community gathers each Sunday to be together. We need one another to survive. We need to know we're not alone, to know that there are others who feel the pain of our pain and the joy of our joy. We need to know that with us always is a great cloud of witnesses, our ancestors, who gave us life and our own particular gifts. We need to know that specific children are depending on us to use those gifts to make the world better for them. In the presence of the love that holds us all, let us bring our whole selves to this time and worship together. One of the ways to survive hard times is to speak openly of how hard they are, to weep together over loss and change and devastation. My friend and teacher, Dr. Joanna Macy, has written that in these times we do not know if we are called to be hospice workers to a dying way of life, or midwives helping bring a new way of being to birth. Either way, or even if we're doing both at once, the same qualities are needed: compassion and presence. Let us meditate on those words, compassion and presence, as we center ourselves through music.
Each Sunday morning, Unitarian Universalists from all over the world light a chalice, the symbol of our faith. You are invited now to light a chalice at home as I speak these words from the Reverend Molly Brewer. My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you that everything is okay right now, that there's no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you, but now our chalice is lit. And so all I ask in this moment is that we remember the words from Rebecca Parker. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love. I invite you now into a moment of receptivity and reflection as we share joys and sorrows of this community. We make sacred the milestones of our lives when we share them with each other. We have here a bowl of water and some stones. If you would like to share your joy or sorrow with all here, you can type it into the chat, and we will place a stone in the bowl for you. If you have a joy or sorrow, or even just a concern that you do not need to share with everyone, type the word stone in the chat, and we will place a stone in the bowl for you.
I place one final stone in the water for all those joys and sorrows that remain in the silence of our hearts because they're too tender to share. Now, let's go deeper. I invite you to make your body comfortable in an attitude of both relaxation and attention. Move your head as far forward and backward as you can to release the tension in your neck. Send roots down from your body into the earth. Feel it ground you. As you breathe in, draw energy up from the earth through those roots into your spinal column. Now send awareness up through the crown of your head to the sky. Feel energy enter your body through the crown of your head and move down your spinal column. You are the meeting point of energy from both earth and sky. Feel that energy pulse up and down your spinal column as you hear these words. Spirit of life, source of all love. Our planet has a fever. Giant storms bring floods that inundate whole countries. Smoke rises from the ruins of thousands of miles of woodlands. Incalculable numbers of beings suffer so much worse things than death. How do we bear it? How do we bear it knowing that it will get worse before it gets better, and it may never get better at all? Help us allow ourselves to grieve. Help us know that our grief arises from our love, which arises from our interbeing with all life on earth. If we can allow ourselves to grieve, if we can sob and wail and stomp our feet, if we can release the tears that clog our throats, we can recover our voices. We can come back to life. We can act from our love on behalf of all life. Spirit of life, power of greening, nothing is stronger than you are. You rise in the trees, you swim in the waters, you fly in the air, you crawl on the earth, you move in our hearts as love, love that is stronger than death. In this our hour of need, we pray, rise in us and overflow as the tears that express our love and clear the way for you to move as the wisdom we need to know how to act and the strength we need to do it. Rise in us, O Spirit of life, and help us make all things new. Amen. Ashe, all our relations, blessed be. After our time of silence today, we'll be singing Meditation on Breathing with the choir of the First Unitarian Society of Denver. Meditation on Breathing was written by Sarah Dan Jones as a response to the events of September 11th, 2001. Now, let us enter the silence that makes us one. I have two short readings for you today. First, from China Galland. Our choice is to be in love or be in fear. But to choose to be in love means to have a mountain inside you. Means you will feel another suffering inside your own body and you will weep. You will have no protection from the world's pain because it will be your own. The second is from Khalil Gibran. Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break that its heart may stand in the sun, so you must know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. Do you remember what happened the day after September 11th, 2001? We all remember the actual horrifying day. But the day after, do you remember what the Bush administration told us to do? Go shopping. We needed to carry on as usual, they said, to send a message to the terrorists that we cannot be hurt by their egregious acts. Our economy must not suffer. This is an excellent example of white supremacy culture. White supremacy culture says that human beings only have value when they're producing and consuming commercial goods and services. This value system can be traced at least as far back as Puritan Calvinism and the idea that material prosperity was a sign that a person was one of the elect who would go to heaven after they died. It continues to serve the very wealthy today whose riches are generated by the hard work of those lower down the production chain. So, with the whole world poised to grieve for and with the United States, we ignored that outpouring of sympathy and grimly went shopping. We showed those terrorists that they could not hurt us, by God. But at what cost? What happens when a person or a nation does not allow themselves time to mourn a grievous loss, to weep when we've experienced a terrible trauma, to process a major change? Ritual mourning allows us to express grief in ways that are socially acceptable. Wailing at a funeral, covering mirrors with black cloth, tearing of hair and clothing. Rituals like these have enabled humans to express grief for millennia. They are deeply necessary to human society because if humans suppress grief rather than express it, we get sick. The pain of grief is a physical, biochemical phenomenon. The natural response to pain is weeping. If we allow ourselves to weep, the tears and wailing cleanse our bodies of the hormones causing the pain. If we do not express our grief by weeping, these hormones stay in our bodies. There they do at least two possible things. One is make us sick. If we stew in those stress hormones instead of releasing them by weeping, they can cause heart disease, high blood pressure, cancer, depression, anxiety, and all manner of other diseases. They can even cause epigenetic changes, which is when trauma or stress affects people's genes, which can then affect their bodies and the bodies of their descendants. It turns out that the Lamarckian view of evolution does have some basis in fact. Everyone in our nation was affected by the trauma that occurred in 2001. And everyone in our nation is being affected now by the trauma of the pandemic, as well as climate change, mass extinction, and all the other problems we're facing. Another thing the stress hormones caused by grief and trauma can do is make us feel angry. In people who don't believe it's okay to cry, grief often comes out as anger, and the same in systems where people think they need to just keep on going instead of stopping and mourning. This is one of the grave dangers of a construct of strength that says a strong person doesn't cry, a strong person just keeps going no matter what. That strong person then becomes an angry person. And anger, like kindness, is contagious. And if everyone's angry all the time, then no one can think straight, and our family or our community or our society goes off the rails. What happened after the post-9/11 shopping? Do you remember that? The nation got really afraid and angry and became focused on revenge. We went to war. And that war resulted in yet more trauma and fear and anger. Another thing that can happen after a loss or trauma is that people go numb. They disconnect from their feelings. Sometimes people do this on purpose because they're afraid that if they allow themselves to feel, they'll fall apart and be permanently unable to function. Other times it just happens as a survival mechanism. It allows people to temporarily keep functioning during an emergency. The problem is those stress hormones are still there, whether or not we're aware of them. So if we go numb, we still need to find a way eventually to reconnect with our feelings and release the stress hormones. Otherwise, we'll end up sick or angry or both. But what about when that loss or trauma just keeps going and going and going? And it's so big that it's hard to wrap our minds around, like, say, the institutional racism that results in shooting after shooting of unarmed Black people, or a global pandemic, or mass extinction or climate change that causes extreme storms and wildfires. What about when our whole planetary life support system is endangered by human behavior that causes all of the above? What about when the trauma we're experiencing is so pervasive and vast and unceasing that it has no edges, no end point in sight? What should we do then? How do we grieve without succumbing to paralysis or despair? Earlier, I mentioned my teacher, Joanna Macy. She is the deep ecologist, systems thinker, and Buddhist practitioner who coined the phrase, the Great Turning. The Great Turning refers to a transition from what Macy calls our industrial growth society to a life-sustaining society. Economist David Korten talks about it as the transition from empire to earth community. Macy says this: to be conscious in our world today is to be aware of vast suffering and unprecedented peril. The feelings that assail us now cannot be equated with the ancient dreads of mortality and the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. Their source lies less in concerns for the personal self than in apprehensions of collective suffering, of what is happening to our own and other species, to the legacy of our ancestors, to coming generations, and to the living body of Earth. What we're dealing with here is akin to the original meaning of compassion, suffering with. It is the distress we feel on behalf of the larger whole of which we're part. It is the pain of the world itself, experienced in each of us. No one is exempt from that pain, any more than one could exist alone and self-sufficient in empty space. Feeling pain for the world is as natural to us as the food and air we draw upon to fashion who we are. It is inseparable from the currents of matter, energy, and information that flow through us and sustain us as interconnected, open systems. We are not closed off from the world, but integral components of it, like cells in a larger body. When that body is traumatized, we sense that trauma too. When it falters and sickens, we feel its pain, whether we pay attention or not. That pain is the price of consciousness in a threatened and suffering world. It is not only natural, it is an absolutely necessary component of our collective healing. As in all organisms, Macy goes on, pain has a purpose. It is a warning signal designed to trigger remedial action. The problem, therefore, lies not with our pain for the world, but in our repression of it. Let me read that part again. The problem, therefore, it lies not with our pain for the world, but our repression of it. When we repress our pain for the world, for fear of falling apart, we cut off the possibility of taking action to heal it. In a TED Talk from a couple of years ago, young Swedish activist Greta Thunberg tells of her journey from deep depression to activism. Thunberg is autistic and, in her words, sees things in black and white, right and wrong, no gray. When she found out about climate change, she couldn't understand how people could be ignoring it or pretending it doesn't exist. She became so afraid and depressed that she lost about 1/3 of her body weight, and she nearly died. But then she decided to do something. She started sitting outside the Swedish Parliament every Friday instead of going to school, demanding climate change with a little cardboard sign. And she got better. She still felt her pain and her fear, but she also began to feel joy again. And you probably know the rest. The action of one 15-year-old girl sparked an international movement of young people who want adults to address climate change. And at long last, the issue of climate change is actually being taken seriously in national politics. Greta Thunberg felt her pain and fear for the world. She couldn't help it. She didn't have the same kinds of coping mechanisms that people who are not autistic do. And she had to act. She had to act or die. Those of us who are not autistic have all kinds of ways of pretending everything is fine, and we usually do it because we're afraid of our pain. But here's the deal. If we allow ourselves to feel our pain and fear and weep, eventually it subsides. It may come back again, and if we let ourselves feel it and weep, it subsides again. The only way out of emotional pain is through. It is the same with our own personal pain for our personal losses, and our pain for change and loss in our communities, and our pain for the planet. All of the world's wisdom traditions say the same things about how to deal with emotional pain. Weep, carry out rituals of mourning, remonstrate with God or the universe, lament your loss. 70% of the Psalms in the Hebrew Bible are Psalms of lamentation. You may hear people interpret the teachings of Buddhism about non-attachment to mean that we shouldn't get attached to people or earthly life. That way, this interpretation goes, when people die or the world is on fire, we won't feel pain. But this is not what the Buddha himself actually taught. There are dozens of Buddhist teaching stories that illustrate. For example, one famous teacher was found weeping by a student after another teacher had died. The student, puzzled, asked what the point of the tradition was if the teacher was suffering when his friend died. The teacher said, "My dear friend has died, and I am sad. The storm will pass through me, and then I will be calm. Sadness is not the same as suffering. Sadness is not the same as suffering." In fact, suffering is brought on by not allowing ourselves to feel sad when feeling sad is appropriate. Only after we experience the storm do we experience the calm that arises later. Only after we've experienced the storm can we hear the still, small voice within, which tells us what to do next. The other thing the world's wisdom traditions tell us is that mourning is not mourning unless it is done in community. Weeping is something we can do alone or in company, but rituals of mourning need to be done together. Human beings need other human beings in times of sorrow. Joanna Macy points out that because the kind and level of our pain for our planet is so vast and so new, People are particularly afraid of letting ourselves fully feel it. Instead, we distract ourselves with consumerist pastimes, thereby making the problems worse. We allow ourselves to go numb, which results in apathy. We feel half dead, alienated, disconnected, unreal. We may become seriously depressed. Macy has developed a body of practice called the work that reconnects, which she and co-writer Molly Brown describe in their book, Coming Back to Life. Its purpose is to help people become fully alive again. Macy wants us to understand that the pain we feel on behalf of the world is the result of our interbeing with it. Our pain arises from our love for the larger body of which we're part, and this larger body is a little blue-green planet whirling through the depths of space around an ordinary star, where the presence of water has enabled the generation of life in all its many forms. Belly-laughing babies, giant redwood trees, blue whales, yellow finches, orange jellyfish, black and white zebras, humans of every color and size and shape. This larger body has been here for billions of years, and we are a part of its story. In the work that reconnects, people gather in small groups. They begin by expressing their love and gratitude for all that is beautiful and good in this world. As Macy and Brown write, we have received an inestimable gift to be alive in this beautiful, self-organizing universe, to participate in the dance of life with senses to perceive it, lungs that breathe it, organs that draw nourishment from it, is a wonder beyond words. And Rabbi Abraham Heschel says, just to live is holy. To be is a blessing. Then, participants support each other as they express their pain and grief about all that is being lost. This can take many hours, sometimes days, depending on the length of the workshop. But once people have fully felt their feelings of sadness, once the storm has passed, then they can access their imagination and creativity and will. They can imagine what to do next. Each person is the unique result of the love of thousands of generations of ancestors. Each has their own gifts and has a particular role to play in the ongoing story of life on Earth. Each then decides what actions they will take to help heal the world, and then they form networks so they can support each other in doing it. In the work that reconnects, releasing pain and grief makes way for creativity and imagination and joy. The only way out is through. And this is the way we can begin to dismantle white supremacy culture and all it is doing to our world. We counter the belief that we are only of value when we're producing and consuming by taking time to mourn when mourning is needed. We allow ourselves to fully feel all of our feelings, including our pain. We support one another when we weep, and when the storm is past, we rise. So may it be. Amen.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. This congregation depends entirely on the generosity of its members and friends. All that we give in time, talent, and treasure is what sustains this community and makes it not just a sanctuary for us to return to for spiritual nourishment, but an oasis from which we can go out into the world carrying the waters of life. You can donate by going to our website at NVUU.org and clicking on the donate button, or send a check to NVUU, 1625 Salvador Avenue, Napa, California, 94558.
Thank you for all you give and all you are. Your gifts of time, talent, and treasure help us create the beloved community here in Napa and beyond. I want to especially thank Janella Otell for being our celebrant today, and Brian Shaw for his music and for editing the video. We'll do our announcements and invitations into community at our Zoom social hour after the service, and you should have the link to that in an email you received this morning. Now I have these closing words for you by Oren Sofer. I trust what this body knows. Breathing in, breathing out, the way home. I trust the ground which I can stand upon, the earth that rises to meet my feet and gives gently beneath my weight. And I trust that ground which I cannot stand upon, the falling away that everything returns to. Now let's sing our closing song, number 1015, I Know I Can. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts out into the world until we meet again. Now, people of this beloved community, as you breathe in and then out, and as you weep, remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. Go shining. Blessed be.